The air in Helixus was thick enough to chew. That's what Jackson Vale thought as he ducked under yet another flickering neon sign assigned to an alien-run mining station in the asteroid belt. He'd expected some culture shock, maybe a little homesickness. What he got was a front-row seat to exploitation with a side of cosmic cynicism. "What's the matter, Ray? Asteroids bigger than your credit score got you down," barked a voice over the station's intercom, dripping with the usual alien disdain that made Eamon wonder if sarcasm was a universal constant. "Only if you plan to garnish my wages with them," Eamon shot back, dodging a slow-moving cargo drone in the corridor. The drones were smarter than they looked, which wasn't saying much considering they were about as intelligent as a rock with delusions of grandeur. The mining station, affectionately known as Gravel Pit 42, was a metallic nightmare of pipes, vents, and more rust than an ancient Terran shipyard. If you squinted, you might have seen charm somewhere in the exposed wiring. The architects were clearly fans of the function-over-form school of design, with a minor in making humans feel as welcome as a porcupine at a balloon convention. Eamon's job was to teach alien youths, a task about as simple as making friends with a black hole. The mining station's version of a classroom was a repurposed storage unit with a view of the asteroid field, a constant reminder that escape was only possible if you could breathe in space. His students were a motley crew, each more downtrodden than the last. There was Grok, a hulking Skalvok with skin like volcanic rock and a personality to match. He was the kind of kid who'd rather punch a wall than read a book, and he'd probably win, too. "Hey, Teach," Grok grumbled as Eamon entered the room. "Heard you humans have a saying about making lemonade. Got any lemons?" "Sorry, Grok, all out, but I've got a fresh batch of sarcasm. Want some?" Grok snorted, a sound akin to gravel in a blender. "Nah. Tastes like despair." There was Gliza, a bright-eyed Ulthran who was genuinely curious about everything except classwork. Her forearms were perpetually in motion, usually fiddling with some gizmo she'd scrounged up from the scrap heaps. "Professor, I made a thing," she chirped, her enthusiasm barely dented by the oppressive atmosphere. She held up a device that looked like a toaster mated with a flux capacitor. "Does it make breakfast or just threaten it?" Eamon mused, eyeing the contraption dubiously. "Both if you're lucky," she replied with a grin that revealed too many teeth for comfort. Then there was Zark, a wiry little Rhinax with a penchant for asking questions no one wanted to answer. "Sir, why do the big aliens get all the good jobs?" Eamon sighed. Zark was the kind of kid who'd have been a philosopher in another life, assuming that life was short and ended in a mining accident. "Because life's fair like a rigged lottery," Eamon replied, trying not to let the truth sour his tone too much. "And we're the lucky winners of this cosmic joke." The bell, or rather, a klaxon that sounded like a cat being strangled by a violin, signaled the start of the lesson. Eamon steeled himself, adjusting his stance as though he were about to face off against a charging bull rather than a roomful of bored aliens. The lesson plan was as dry as a Martian martini. Galactic history, with a focus on why humans were always getting the short end of the interstellar stick. Yet, he had a knack for making the material relatable with a touch of gallows humor. "So, class," he began, pacing slowly like a wary captain on a sinking ship. "Today we're diving into the glorious mess known as the trade wars. You know, back when everyone thought tariffs were a good idea until the whole galaxy went bankrupt." "Why do humans keep getting screwed over?" Grok asked, his tone less accusatory and more genuinely puzzled. "Because we're damn good at making enemies," Eamon said, shrugging. "That, and we never read the fine print." He launched into a tirade about the absurdities of interstellar politics, peppering his monologue with quips about bureaucracy that made Grok chortle and Gliza momentarily stop tinkering. As the class dragged on, Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that he was part of a cosmic tragedy, a bit player in a play that refused to end. The kids were sharp, but the system was sharper, slicing away at their dreams like a butcher with a grudge. After class, While the students shuffled out, Eamon lingered behind, staring out the small window at the asteroid field. He swore the rocks were laughing at him, mocking his impotence in the face of an uncaring universe. Life at Gravel Pit 42 was a test of endurance, but not of the physical kind, more of a mental marathon through the muck of misery and hopelessness. "Fancy a drink, Ray?" came a voice from the door, snapping Eamon out of his brooding. It was Sala, the station's human liaison officer, and one of the few people he could stomach on a bad day. "Does the sun bake your brain?" Eamon replied, already heading towards the makeshift bar they'd cobbled together from spare parts and misplaced optimism. The bar was a dingy affair, tucked into a corner of the station that the cleaning bots had long since given up on. It was considered quaint if you were generous, hazardous if you weren't. They sat at the counter, a rusty slab of metal that creaked ominously under any weight more than a feather. "How's the teaching gig treating you?" Sala asked, pouring 2 glasses of something that might have been booze but tasted more like regret. "Like a bad joke without a punchline," Eamon muttered, taking a swig and grimacing. "The kids are bright, but it's like throwing pearls before swine." "Or asteroids," Sala chuckled, a sound that was more cough than laugh. "And management. They make asteroids look appealing," Eamon replied. "They're all about efficiency, squeezing every drop of profit out of this place like it's a damn lemon." She nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "They're squeezing the life out of this station and everyone on it." Eamon couldn't argue with that. The station was a testament to everything wrong with the universe: greed, exploitation, and the suffocating weight of apathy. It was enough to make a saint swear off salvation. "You ever wonder if we're just the cosmic punchline?" Eamon asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Every day, Ray, every damn day," Sala replied, raising her glass in a mock toast. They drank in silence, each sip a reminder of the futility they faced. Yet in that shared silence there was a camaraderie, a small flicker of rebellion against the darkness. As the hours ticked by, Eamon realized he'd need more than snark and sarcasm to survive this place. The kids deserved better, and maybe, just maybe, he could help them see that there was more to life than just rocks and rust. That thought gave him something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was fragile and fleeting, but it was there, glimmering in the dark like a distant star. Then the station's alarm blared, a sound that could wake the dead or, worse, the management. Eamon and Sala exchanged a glance, the kind that spoke volumes without uttering a word. "Looks like we're up," Sala said, standing with the steady resolve of someone who'd seen too many shifts go sideways. Eamon sighed, downing the last of his drink. "If this is the end, at least I won't die sober." They headed out into the chaos, leaving behind the bar and what little comfort it offered. The asteroid belt loomed large outside, a reminder of the cosmic dance they were all unwillingly a part of. As they stepped into the fray, Eamon couldn't help but chuckle. "You know," he said to Sala, "I'd always hoped for a quiet life." "You're in the wrong asteroid belt for that, Ray," she replied, her voice a blend of humor and resignation. The station's corridors thrummed with the tension of impending disaster, but Eamon felt oddly at peace. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something worth fighting for in this battered corner of the universe. And if not, well, at least he'd have a hell of a story to tell. Eamon Ray navigated the station's twisted corridors, wondering if management had designed them to be as mind-numbing as the job itself. The klaxon continued its tortured wailing, a sound that could make even a rock cry for mercy. As he and Sala rounded a corner, they ran into Varak, the station's security chief, and a creature with more legs than sense. "What in the name of entropy is going on?" Eamon asked, hoping Varak's 12 eyes had caught more than the latest soap opera on the interstellar channels. "Meeting," Varak grunted, his antennae twitching with irritation. "Big bosses wanna talk." "Great, another opportunity to practice my eye rolling," Eamon muttered, nudging Sala. "Think they'll notice if I mime shooting myself during the meeting?" Sala shrugged. If they do, maybe they'll promote you for being proactive. They entered the meeting room, a drab chamber decorated with all the flair of a prison cell. The table was littered with data pads and empty promises, while a holographic display flickered in the corner, showing the asteroid field's latest trajectory in case anyone cared, which no one did. The meeting was already in full swing, with representatives from various alien races packed in like sardines in a tin can, if sardines had grievances and were perpetually annoyed. At the head of the table sat Gorak, the station's command overseer, his skin a sickly shade of green that suggested he'd been dyed by the universe's bad taste. "We have a situation," Gorak declared, in a voice that could bore a sloth to sleep. "Earth is accused of inciting unrest among the mining consortiums. The trial is next week." There was a collective groan, like the sound of 1,000 souls realizing they'd have to work overtime for free. "Unrest," Eamon spoke up, feigning surprise. "And here I thought we were just cultivating interstellar harmony with our lovely atmosphere and fair wages." Gorak's eyes narrowed, his expression a mix of impatience and constipation. "This is serious, Ray. If Earth loses, it means tighter regulations, more oversight, and less profit for everyone." "Which is terrible," Eamon said, nodding as if he cared, "because we all know this place is just one big cash cow waiting to be milked dry." Gorak ignored him, addressing the room. "We need to ensure that our operations remain unaffected. Any disruptions will be met with disciplinary action." Translation: "Keep your heads down and your complaints quieter than a mouse on mute," Sala whispered to Eamon. The meeting droned on, with various alien delegates airing grievances about efficiency, productivity, and other buzzwords that were about as engaging as watching paint dry. Eamon's mind wandered back to his students, their faces flickering in his thoughts like a slideshow highlighting the station's few bright spots. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting finally concluded with Gorak's parting threat, encouragement. "Remember, we're all in this together. Cooperation is key." As the crowd dispersed, Eamon leaned toward Sala. "If we're all in this together, why do I feel like we're on a sinking ship while they're in the lifeboats?" "Because you're not as dense as the management," Sala replied. "Let's hope the trial isn't just a formality." Eamon sighed, knowing full well that hope was a rare commodity in this corner of the galaxy. The trial against Earth loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to drench everything in red tape and bureaucracy. He needed to focus on his students, who might actually give a damn about what happened next. He headed back to the classroom, the repurposed storage unit that had become his sanctuary of sorts. The students were already there, with Grok tossing pebbles at the ceiling while Gliza fiddled with her latest contraption. Zark was deep in thought, likely trying to solve the mysteries of the universe or at least figure out how to sneak more snacks into class. "All right, scholars," Eamon announced, clapping his hands to get their attention. "Today, we're diving into the concept of resilience, also known as how to survive when everything goes to hell." Grok raised an eyebrow, or at least the Skalvok equivalent, which involved raising a series of rocky ridges across his forehead. "Sounds like another day at Gravel Pit 42. "Exactly," Eamon said, nodding. "But more importantly, it's about how humans have survived countless disasters, mostly of our own making." Gliza's eyes lit up. "You mean like the time your people blew up a planet?" "That was a misunderstanding," Eamon replied, waving a dismissive hand. "The planet was asking for it. Terrible hospitality." "Is it true humans can survive in space without suits?" Zark piped up, his curiosity evident. "Only if they are idiots," Eamon replied. "But we are good at improvisation, which is just a fancy way of saying we're stubborn enough to try anything once." Grok snorted, his gravelly laugh shaking the air. "So, humans are like rocks you throw at a window. They might not break it, but they sure enjoy trying." Eamon grinned. "Exactly. Now, let's talk about the trade wars and how our stubbornness played a role." As Eamon launched into the lesson, he noticed the students' growing interest in human history. It wasn't just the novelty of learning about another species. It was the spark of understanding that maybe, just maybe, there was something to admire about humanity's knack for survival against all odds. He explained how humans had navigated countless interstellar conflicts, often by sheer willpower and an uncanny ability to turn disasters into opportunities. Sure, they'd made enemies along the way, but they'd also forged alliances, usually by being the lesser of two evils. The kids were surprisingly engaged, asking questions that showed they weren't just listening, they were thinking. It gave Eamon a strange sense of pride, the kind you might feel when you realize your dog can finally fetch a stick without eating it. "Why do humans keep fighting when they know they'll lose?" Zark asked, his voice tinged with a hint of admiration. "Because losing isn't the worst thing," Eamon replied, a wry smile on his lips. "Giving up is. And humans have an annoying habit of refusing to quit, even when it makes no sense." Grok nodded, his rocky exterior softening for a moment. "So, it's like punching a wall because it feels good, not because you'll win." "Exactly," Eamon said. "And sometimes the wall cracks first." The lesson continued, with Eamon weaving tales of human tenacity and stubbornness, painting them not as foolhardy zealots but as beings who thrived on adversity. It was easy to romanticize the struggle, to make it sound noble rather than desperate. As the class wrapped up, Eamon felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, his students would take these lessons to heart. Not because they wanted to be human, but because they could see the value in resilience. He dismissed the class, and the students filed out, their conversations buzzing with excitement rather than the usual grumbling. As Grok passed by, he paused, giving Eamon a nod. "Thanks, Teach. Maybe humans aren't so bad after all." Eamon chuckled, clapping Grok on the back. "Don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to uphold." With the classroom empty, Eamon took a moment to reflect. The trial against Earth was a looming threat, but perhaps there was a silver lining. The students' curiosity about human ingenuity and resilience gave him a reason to keep pushing forward, to fight against the tide of apathy that threatened to drown them all. He stepped outside, the asteroid field lingering in the distance like a vast cosmic audience, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the occasion or crumble under the weight of its own hubris. As he walked down the corridor, he ran into Sala again. She wore a weary expression, one that mirrored his own but held a glimmer of determination beneath the surface. "How'd the lesson go?" she asked, falling into step beside him. "Better than expected," Eamon replied. "The kids are starting to see humanity as more than just a cautionary tale." "That's progress," Sala said with a nod. "Think they can help us with this trial mess?" "I don't know," Eamon admitted. "But if we can show them what we're made of, maybe they'll stand with us when it counts." She gave him a sideways glance, her eyes searching for any hint of doubt. "You really believe that?" "I have to," Eamon said, his voice a blend of cynicism and conviction. "Because if we don't, then we're just waiting for the universe to bury us." Sala laughed, a genuine sound that cut through the station's oppressive atmosphere. "You know, for a guy who complains about everything, you're surprisingly optimistic." Eamon shrugged. "It's either that or start talking to the walls, and I've heard they're terrible conversationalists." They reached the bar, which had somehow become their unofficial meeting spot. Sala poured them each a drink, the liquid sloshing around like a storm in a glass. "To humanity," she said, raising her glass. "May we survive our own stupidity." Eamon clinked his glass against hers, the sound echoing with a sense of defiance. "And may we learn to laugh at the absurdity of it all." The trial loomed in the distance, a dark cloud threatening to wash away any semblance of normalcy. But for now, Eamon found solace in the small victories, in the students' burgeoning interest and the camaraderie shared over a stiff drink. As they sat in silence, Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something that would test their resolve and their ability to adapt. But for now, he was content to savor the moment, to bask in the glow of hope and defiance, however fleeting it might be. The klaxon blared again, a reminder that the universe never slept and neither could they. As Eamon and Salah stood to face whatever fresh hell awaited them, he couldn't help but chuckle. "Think they'll give us a break before the next catastrophe?" he asked. Salah smirked, a twinkle in her eye. "Not a chance, Ray. We're in this for the long haul." Eamon nodded, steeling himself for the trials ahead, both literal and metaphorical. "Then let's make sure we give them a hell of a show." And with that, they plunged back into the chaos, ready to take on whatever the universe had in store, armed with nothing but sarcasm, determination, and a shared belief that sometimes the underdogs did come out on top. Eamon Ray had barely finished his drink when the klaxon blasted through the bar, a banshee wail announcing yet another station-wide emergency. Or, as he liked to call it, Thursday. "Every bloody time," he muttered, slamming his glass down. "Can a guy wallow in existential dread without interruption?" Salah smirked as she downed her drink, looking far too composed for someone about to face God knows what kind of disaster. "Look alive, Ray. Could be our last chance to die heroically in a mundane mining accident." They filed out of the bar and back into the station's labyrinthine corridors, where chaos had already begun to spread like a virus. The usual suspects, overzealous security officers and panicked civilians, were out in force, the former shouting orders and the latter ignoring them with practiced indifference. Eamon spotted Varrock, the station's security chief, his 12 eyes darting around like a hyperactive surveillance drone. The antennae on his head twitched, probably picking up on the encroaching wave of anarchy. "Eamon," Varrock's voice was like gravel in a blender, "get your students under control. We've got a situation." "Situation?" Eamon repeated. "That's what you call it when the reactor's about to turn us into cosmic dust." "The reactor's not the problem. It's the cargo drones," Varrock said, his antennae flaring with irritation. "They're refusing to follow orders, something about dignity and purpose." Eamon rolled his eyes. "Great, a mutiny of flying toasters. Just what we needed." He made his way back to the classroom, or as he liked to think of it, the least horrible place on the station. The students were already gathered, their expressions a mix of confusion and excitement. Grok was in the corner, cracking his knuckles like he was preparing for a brawl. "All right, geniuses," Eamon began, his voice slicing through their chatter. "Who's up for some civil disobedience?" Glee's hand shot up. "Does it involve blowing something up?" "Not yet," Eamon replied. "But give it time." Zark tilted his head, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "What's going on, Eamon? Are we in danger?" "Just the usual impending doom," Eamon said with a shrug. "But this time we might have a chance to stick it to the man. Or in this case the 12-eyed security chief." Grok grinned, a sinister sight given his rocky visage. "About time we did something fun. What's the plan, Teach?" Eamon paced the front of the room, weaving words like a tapestry, a scrap of fabric hastily stitched together. "Let's talk revolutions. Earth had a few good ones. The kind where people got fed up with being told what to do by some overgrown bureaucrat with delusions of grandeur." The students leaned in, their interest piqued by the promise of rebellion. "Take the French Revolution," Eamon continued. "Bunch of folks decided they'd had enough of their heads being a little too attached to their bodies. So they decided to introduce the ruling class to the business end of a guillotine." "Did it work?" Grok asked, genuinely intrigued. "Depends on how you define work," Eamon replied, a wry smile playing on his lips. "But it sure got their attention. And sometimes that's enough to start making changes." He could see the gears turning in their minds, the idea of standing up to the oppressive station authorities sparking something akin to hope, or at least mischief. "But we don't have guillotines," Gleeza pointed out, always the practical one. "No," Eamon conceded, "but we do have cargo drones with existential crises, and that's a start." The classroom door burst open and Varrock stormed in, his antennae practically vibrating with rage. "Eamon, control your students." Eamon turned to face him, arms crossed. "Control in this place. We're lucky if we can control the temperature." Varrock's eyes narrowed. I've got orders to maintain order. Funny, Eamon shot back. I thought your orders were to protect us, not treat us like livestock. They're the same thing, Varric snapped, his patience wearing thin. Eamon approached him, a defiant glint in his eyes. Not where I come from. Back on Earth, we have this quaint little idea called freedom. It's messy and inconvenient, but it beats the hell out of being told what to do by someone who can't even blink symmetrically. The students watched, their eyes wide with a mix of admiration and trepidation. This was more than just a teacher confronting an authority figure. It was a lesson in action. Varric sneered, his confidence waning. Your defiance will cost you, Eamon shrugged, unfazed. Maybe, but at least I'll go down swinging. Varric stormed out, his threat hanging in the air like a bad smell. The students turned to Eamon, their young faces filled with a new kind of respect. So, what now? Gliza asked, her voice tinged with excitement. Eamon grinned. Now we see just how far we can push before they start pushing back. The following days were a blur of minor rebellions and acts of defiance. The students took to the idea with gusto, exploring ways to subvert the authority that had long kept them under its thumb. They jammed the intercoms with recordings of Earth rock music, actual rocks banging together, courtesy of Grok, and reprogrammed the cargo drones to perform impromptu dance routines in the hallways. Eamon guided them, offering advice and caution in equal measure. He knew that this was more than just a game. It was a chance to teach them the power of standing up, even if the odds of winning were slim. As they plotted their next move, Eamon couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The students were coming into their own, not just as rebels with a cause, but as thinkers who could question the status quo. Sala joined them in the classroom one evening, her face illuminated by the glow of the asteroid field outside. News travels fast, she said, nodding towards the students. You're inspiring a revolution, Ray. Hardly, Eamon replied, though his eyes twinkled with mischief. Just lighting a fire under their asses. Sala chuckled. You always did have a way with words. Think it'll make a difference? Eamon considered the question, watching as Grok and Zark debated the merits of spray painting the station's core reactor with slogans from Earth history. I think, he said slowly, that it might not change the whole damn universe, but it changes something for them, and that's a start. The klaxon blared again, its wailing cry a familiar if unwelcome companion. This time, though, it wasn't just an alarm. It was a call to action. The students looked to Eamon, their fearless leader, in the absurdity of it all. Time for another lesson, he said, his voice steady. And this one's about courage. Not the absence of fear, hell, we all know fear, but the decision that something else is more important. Gliza nodded, eyes gleaming with determination. Let's go make some history. They filed out of the classroom, Eamon leading the charge with Sala by his side. The station was awash with the typical chaos of an emergency, but there was something different in the air, an electricity that buzzed with potential, with the promise of change. As they made their way through the twisted corridors, Eamon couldn't help but think about the trial ahead, the accusations against Earth that loomed like a shadow. It wasn't just about teaching these kids to fight back. It was about showing them that they had a choice. Think they'll listen? Sala asked, her eyes scanning the mayhem around them. They might, Eamon said, his voice laced with hope and sarcasm. Or they might throw us all out the nearest airlock. Either way, it'll be a damn sight more interesting than just sitting here and taking it. They reached the heart of the commotion, where Varric and his officers were trying and failing to restore order. The cargo drones had gone rogue, whizzing through the air with wild abandon, their newfound sense of purpose giving them a chaotic grace. Eamon watched the spectacle, a grin spreading across his face. It was ridiculous and reckless, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were alive, not just going through the motions in a tin can of despair. Varric spotted Eamon and marched over, his anger palpable. This is your doing, isn't it? Eamon shrugged, feigning innocence. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just an innocent teacher trying to educate young minds. You're a menace, Varric growled, and you're going to regret this. Probably, Eamon conceded, meeting Varek's gaze with unflinching defiance. But until then, I'm enjoying the show. The students were right behind him, their presence a silent testament to the tiny revolution they'd sparked. For all its chaos and uncertainty, it was a step towards something better, something worth fighting for. As the drones danced and the klaxon wailed, Eamon felt a surge of confidence. Maybe they couldn't change the universe, but they could damn well shake it up. And in a place like Gravel Pit 42, that was no small feat. He turned to his students, his voice rising above the clamor. Remember, it's not about winning. It's about showing them that we won't just sit back and take it. Grok nodded, his rocky face set with determination. Let's give them something to remember. They stood together, a ragtag group of rebels armed with nothing but hope and stubbornness. And for the first time, Eamon felt like they might actually have a fighting chance. To hell with waiting for the universe to bury us, he said, raising his voice to rally them. Let's show them what we're made of. And with that, they charged into the fray, ready to take on whatever the future had in store, armed with nothing but their wit, their resolve, and the belief that sometimes the underdogs really do come out on top. The klaxon was at it again, screaming its head off like a toddler who just found out that nap time was non-negotiable. Eamon Ray barely flinched. He developed a talent for tuning out the relentless wailing, just like he did with the students when they started quoting the latest interstellar pop garbage. Inspiration, Eamon muttered to himself, slouched in the corner of the repurposed storage unit he dared to call a classroom. That's what we're doing here, inspiring minds to think for themselves. Or at least to think twice before they fly cargo drones into walls. Honestly, a few bent walls might improve the station's interior design, which currently didn't fall far outside the aesthetic of post-apocalyptic metal scrapyard. The air smelled of rust and regret, and the lighting flickered as if it was trying to communicate in Morse code. Sauce. Gliza and Grok were whispering conspiratorially in the back, their heads huddled close together over a datapad. Eamon didn't even try to eavesdrop. He had long since accepted that the blend of alien languages and teenage slang was past his grasp. Varek, the 12-eyed security overlord, was no doubt plotting his own lecture on the importance of conformity. He could teach a class on how to scare small children, Eamon mused, tapping his chin, and small adults, and me if I'm honest. The students were more than engaged, though. Since Eamon's impromptu civics class on historical revolutions, they'd taken up the mantle of rebellion like they'd been born for it. Which, considering the station's oppressive grip, might not be far from the truth. All right, listen up, Eamon called, clapping his hands to get their attention. Today's lesson, how not to get caught when the station's security decides to parade their shiny boots in your general direction. Is this on the exam? Zark asked, his eyes full of mischief. Life's the exam, Zark, Eamon replied. And no one's handing out answer sheets. They chuckled, though it was the kind of laugh that hinted at anxiety lurking beneath the surface. These kids were brave, sure, but they weren't stupid. We need to step up our game, Eamon continued. They're onto us. Varek's been sniffing around like a bloodhound with a vendetta. Grok tilted his rocky head, considering. You think he's going to clamp down harder? Probably, Eamon admitted. But it's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. The more you squeeze, the more of a mess you make. Sala arrived, her usual air of calm slightly disrupted by the chaos around her. Gorek is edgy, she announced, joining the group huddled around Eamon. They're talking about increasing security measures. Terrific, Eamon said dryly. I was worried things were getting too peaceful around here. Gliza was the first to speak up. We have to do something. They can't silence us all, can they? Depends on how creative they get, Eamon replied, leaning against the wall. But the idea isn't to find out. We need subtlety. Think guerrilla tactics, not full frontal assault. This isn't a movie and we're not getting sequels. The klaxon paused, taking a breath before launching back into its regular symphony of distress. Eamon wished he could do the same, who knew that rebellion would be so exhausting. So what's the plan, Teach? Sala asked, her voice laced with curiosity and a hint of challenge. Eamon considered it, weighing their options against the inevitable blowback. We keep going, but smarter. Hit them where they least expect it. Play the long game. Make them dance to our rhythm without realizing it. The students nodded, eager to embrace whatever chaotic plan Eamon concocted. They had tasted the thrill of rebellion, and they weren't about to let it go. Meanwhile, across the station in the drab meeting room that doubled as a command center, Varek and Gorak were having a heart-to-heart, or rather, an eye to antennas. "This cannot continue," Varek grumbled, his antennae twitching like an overcaffeinated insect. "The human's influence is spreading like a contagion." Gorak, ever the calm overseer, leaned back in a chair that looked about ready to collapse. "He's just a teacher, Varek. How much damage can one man do?" Varek scoffed, his 12 eyes narrowing. "Enough to turn our own youth against us. Today it's pranks and disobedience. Tomorrow, who knows, they might decide to elect him president." Gorak chuckled, a deep rumble that shook his oversized belly. "We don't have a president." "Exactly my point," Varek snapped. "He's sowing ideas, dangerous ones, ones that could undermine everything we've built here." "What do you suggest?" Gorak asked, a touch of sarcasm in his tone. "We can't just eject everyone who disagrees with us." Varek's face softened into what could almost be mistaken for a smile, if one was generous with their interpretations. "No, but we can remind them who's in charge. Tighten the screws, increase patrols, double down on surveillance." Gorak sighed, rubbing his green-skinned temples. "And drive them further into rebellion in the process. The risk we take," Varek replied, "is doing nothing and letting them spiral out of control. We need to act now before they become more than an annoyance." Reluctantly, Gorak nodded. "Fine, but keep it moderate. We don't need a full-blown revolt on our hands." Varek nodded, his confidence restored. "Leave it to me. By the time I'm done, they'll think twice before listening to that Earth troublemaker." Back in the classroom, Eamon was wrapping up what could only be described as a crash course in subversion. "Remember," he said, "the key is to stay one step ahead, expect them to notice, expect them to react, and be ready when they do." Grok raised one stony hand. "What if they come for us individually?" Eamon paused, considering the question carefully. "Then you stand together. Alone, we're easy targets, but together we can be a real pain in the ass." The students seemed to take this to heart, a silent pact forming in the room. Eamon could almost see the gears turning, their resolve hardening into something tangible, something that could withstand the pressure Varek and his ilk would surely bring. "All right, class dismissed," Eamon said, clapping his hands. "Go out there and make me proud, or at least don't blow anything up without a good reason." As they filed out, Sala lingered, a thoughtful look on her face. "You really think we can pull this off?" Eamon shrugged, a smile playing at his lips. "Why not? History's full of people pulling off the impossible. And if all else fails, at least it'll be one hell of a story." Sala shook her head, amused. "You really are something, Eamon." "Damn right," he replied, flashing a grin. "And if we're lucky, maybe we can turn this floating junkyard into something worth bragging about." The klaxon was still going, of course. But as Eamon watched his students head out into the chaotic corridors of Gravel Pit 42, he couldn't help but feel a surge of optimism. It was a fool's hope, maybe, but it was better than nothing. They had a long way to go, but every step was a step in the right direction. And with every act of defiance, they were carving out a future that wasn't dictated by fear or control, but by choice. "To hell with the odds," Eamon muttered to himself, watching as the station's overhead lights flickered in their relentless dance. "Let's give them something to talk about." And with that, the band of misfits dissolved into the chaos, their spirits not yet crushed by the weight of expectation and consequence. They were young, they were bold, and most importantly, they were ready to make some noise. In the days that followed, the station was abuzz with activity. The students took to Eamon's teachings with fervor, their enthusiasm infectious. Acts of defiance, small but significant, became the new normal. Security cameras were redirected to show loops of empty hallways, and intercom systems were hijacked to broadcast speeches from Earth's rebellious past. And somewhere in the mess, there was hope. Eamon found himself in the bar during one of the rare moments of downtime. Sala joined him, ordering a drink that looked like it could melt steel. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the patrons move about like oblivious ants in a metal anthill. "You think they'll catch on?" Sala asked, taking a sip of her drink with a wince. "Eventually," Eamon replied. "But by then, the damage will be done. It's not about winning every battle, it's about making sure they know we're here." Sala nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're a dangerous man, Ray. And you're just figuring that out now," he quipped, raising an eyebrow. They chuckled, the sound drowned out by the clamor of the bar. For the first time in a long time, Eamon felt a sense of purpose. Sure, the station was still a rusty death trap in the middle of an asteroid belt, but it was their death trap. And damn it if they weren't going to make it a home, or at least a slightly more tolerable prison. Meanwhile, Varak was implementing his new security measures with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Patrols doubled, checkpoints sprang up at random intervals, and the station's already tense atmosphere grew even more so. But through it all, Eamon's band of rebels remained unfazed, adapting to the new challenges with a resilience that defied logic. "Think it'll work?" Grok asked one evening, crouched in the shadows of a hallway as they waited for a patrol to pass. Eamon shrugged, his eyes scanning the corridor. "Depends on how much they underestimate us." And let's be honest, that's usually a lot. They shared a grin, knowing full well the risks they were taking. But as far as Eamon was concerned, it was worth it. Even if they were just a group of kids and one jaded teacher, they had something Varak and his cronies would never have: the power of a collective dream. "You ready?" Eamon asked, hearing the distant footsteps fade away. Grok nodded, determination etched into his rocky features. Ready as ever. With that, they slipped into the night, their hearts pounding in time with the station's pulsating machinery. It was a game of cat and mouse, but the stakes were higher than ever. Eamon knew they couldn't keep it up forever. Eventually, something would give. But until that day came, they'd fight on, relentless in the face of adversity, defying the odds with every breath. "To hell with it," Eamon murmured, his words lost to the hum of the station. "Let's make those bastards dance." And so, the rebellion carried on, a flicker of hope in a universe that had long since forgotten what hope looked like. As the klaxon wailed in the distance, Eamon couldn't help but smile. They might not win every battle, but they were damn sure going to make each one count. The klaxon finally died, but the silence it left in its wake was anything but peaceful. It was more like the awkward pause after someone at a party has just told a joke that didn't quite land. Eamon stood in the corridor, the shadows long and threatening, and wondered if this was what it felt like to be a rat in a maze. Only in this case, the cheese was a vague promise of freedom, and the maze was run by aliens who had as much empathy as a toaster. Grok, Gliza, and the other students had scattered, each one slipping into the network of service tunnels and access shafts that laced gravel pit 42 like veins through a corpse. It was the only way they'd stayed ahead of Varak's increasingly aggressive security measures. But the walls had ears, or in this case, too many eyes. Eamon couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. He turned a corner and walked smack into a patrol. The corridor was dimly lit, just bright enough to highlight the unfriendly faces of 3 security drones, their metallic bodies gleaming dully. Varak certainly knew how to pick him: intimidating, efficient, and about as welcoming as a tax audit. "Well, if it isn't my favorite teaching tool," Eamon drawled, backing up a step. "What can I do for you fine gentlemen today?" The lead drone's voice crackled to life, its tones as smooth as sandpaper. "Eamon Ray, you are under arrest for inciting rebellion and endangering the station." Eamon sighed, the kind of sigh that spoke volumes without saying a word. "I thought I was just underappreciated. I suppose being officially recognized for my talents is nice." His dry wit was met with as much appreciation as a lead balloon. The drones advanced, their intentions clear. Eamon considered his options, which ranged from bad to even worse. He had a feeling they weren't going to let him go with just a warning. "Do I get a trial?" Eamon asked, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Or are you guys more of the shoot first, ask questions, never type?" The drone regarded him with its unblinking gaze. "You will be detained until further notice. Cooperation is advised." "Ah, so it's the ask questions in a soundproof room type. Good to know." With that, they led him away, the corridor closing in like the maw of some terrible beast. Eamon couldn't help but think that Thursday was living up to its infamous reputation again. Varric greeted him in the drab meeting room with a smile that was more predatory than friendly. "Mr. Ray," he said, his voice smooth and oily. "Welcome to the heart of the operation." "Charming Dacre," Eamon replied, taking in the room's bare walls and flickering lights. "I see you've gone with the industrial dystopia theme." Varric ignored the jab, motioning for Eamon to sit. "You've caused quite a stir, you know. The youth here are more spirited than we anticipated." Eamon leaned back in his chair, the very picture of nonchalance. "What can I say? I'm a born motivator. It's a gift. This is not a joke," Varric snapped, his antennae twitching in irritation. "Your actions could have serious consequences. For who?" Eamon asked innocently. "The students? Or just your fragile sense of control?" Gorak, who was seated at the head of the table, rubbed his temples like a man nursing a particularly nasty hangover. "Eamon, we're offering you a chance. A chance to end this without further incident." Eamon met his gaze evenly. "And if I don't?" Varric leaned forward, his eyes boring into Eamon's. "Then we will ensure that your influence is contained permanently." "Ah, the carrot and stick approach," Eamon said, nodding sagely. "Classic. But doesn't that usually involve an actual carrot?" Gorak chuckled despite himself, but Varric was less amused. "This is your last warning, Ray. The trial is set and Earth's fate hangs in the balance. Don't make it worse for yourself." Eamon shrugged, a smirk playing at his lips. "If I'm going down, I might as well go down swinging." The meeting didn't last much longer. Eamon was escorted to a holding cell, the door clanging shut with the finality of a coffin lid. The walls were a lifeless gray, the air thick with the scent of recycled despair. But Eamon was undeterred. He'd always believed that a prison was just a work environment with more bars. Back in the bowels of the station, the students were regrouping. Sala had taken charge in Eamon's absence, her calm demeanor a steadying force amidst the chaos. She gathered Grok, Gliza, and the others in a secluded corner of the station, where the walls didn't have ears and the air didn't taste of fear. "You all heard what happened?" Sala asked, her voice carrying a resolute edge. Grok nodded, his brow furrowed. "Yeah. They got Eamon. What do we do now?" "We stick to the plan," Sala replied, her eyes sweeping over the group. "We keep the pressure on. They might have Eamon, but they don't have us." Gliza, ever the skeptic, crossed her arms. "And what if they come after us next? Then we make sure they regret it," Sala said with a fierceness that surprised even her. "Eamon taught us to think for ourselves, to challenge the status quo. We can't let his capture be the end." The group nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but the stakes were too high to back down now. They had come too far, seen too much to simply return to the way things were. "All right," Sala said, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "Let's give them hell." The trial was scheduled to begin in just a few days. The atmosphere aboard the station was tense, the air crackling with anticipation. Eamon sat in his cell, the walls closing in, but his spirit unbowed. He spent his time plotting, scheming, and occasionally talking to himself, much to the chagrin of the guard stationed outside. "Enjoying the view?" Eamon called out, peering through the bars. The guard, a surly alien with a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp, grunted in response. Clearly, he was not one for conversation. "Guess it's true what they say," Eamon continued, undeterred. "Nice guys really do finish last, or in this case, end up on guard duty." The guard's expression didn't change, but Eamon liked to think he was getting to him. Little victories, after all. In the meantime, Varric and Gorak were preparing for the trial with the enthusiasm of men who had already counted their chickens before they'd hatched. They were confident, perhaps overly so. that the verdict would go in their favor. After all, the evidence against Earth was damning, and Eamon's influence had only made matters worse. "I don't know what you're worried about," Varric said to Gorak as they reviewed the case files. "With him out of the way, the students will fall back in line." Gorak wasn't so sure. "You underestimate them, Varric. Eamon may be out of the picture, but his ideas linger. They've taken root. Then we simply uproot them," Varric replied with a dismissive wave of his hand. Gorak shook his head, a weary sigh escaping him. "It's not that simple. It never is." Back in the cell, Eamon lay on the cot, staring up at the ceiling. Somewhere in this mess of steel and regret, his students were carrying on. That thought, at least, was a comfort. He'd spent his life teaching them to question, to challenge, to think for themselves. And if that meant he had to spend a little time in a dingy cell, well, it was a small price to pay. As footsteps echoed outside, Eamon sat up, curious. The door swung open, and to his surprise, Sala stood there, flanked by two students. Eamon blinked, convinced it was a trick of the mind. "Eamon," Sala said, her voice steady and strong, "we're getting you out of here." His heart leapt at the sound of her words, but his pragmatism kicked in immediately. "How?" "Don't tell me you've got a spare key." "Something like that," she replied with a grin. "We've disabled the security system in this sector. You'll have to move fast, though." Eamon felt a swell of pride. His students had grown into something remarkable, something unexpected. "You're sure you want to do this?" "We're sure," Gliza said, determination etched into her features. "You taught us to fight for what's right. We can't let them win." Eamon nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "All right, then. Let's make some noise." And with that, they slipped into the corridor, the adrenaline surging through them like a live wire. Somewhere in the depths of the station, the klaxon began to wail again, a siren song that heralded chaos. The rebellion wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as Eamon and his students weaved through the labyrinthine corridors of Gravel Pit 42, he knew one thing for certain: they weren't going down without a fight. Eamon Ray paced his cell like a caged animal, a creature of frustration and barely suppressed energy. The walls were as drab as his prospects, a dull gray that matched the mood of the guard outside, who was still doing his best impression of a statue. "Hey, stone face," Eamon called out. "You got any cards, or is staring into space your only hobby?" The guard didn't even blink. Eamon sighed, a theatrical sound of boredom. "Guess it's true what they say, you get what you pay for. I'd ask for a book, but I doubt you've seen one." The guard remained as lively as a rock in a coma, and Eamon resumed his pacing. He had a plan, as half-baked as it was, but he needed a way to communicate with the outside world. The comm lines were monitored, and his window for action was as slim as Varric's chances of winning a beauty contest. Eamon sat back down on the cot, rubbing his temples. He needed to send a message to Earth, and fast. If the station's trial went ahead as planned, it would spell disaster for everyone involved, especially with the mining consortiums ready to point fingers and Earth being the convenient scapegoat. A moment later, an idea sparked in his mind, a flash of inspiration as bright as the station lights were dim. He had one resource left: human ingenuity, and the occasional poorly supervised cargo drone. In the dim corners of the service tunnels, Grok, Gliza, and Sala were strategizing. The students, fueled by Eamon's arrest, were more determined than ever. They'd seen their teacher be carted off for doing what they all believed in, and it was time to act. "All right," Sala said, addressing the ragtag group, "we need to make our move before they tighten their grip any further." Grok scratched his head, his brow creased in thought. "We could disable the security systems again, but they'll catch on eventually. We could set off some fireworks in the central hub," Gliza suggested, her voice tinged with mischief. "That'd definitely cause a distraction, a fireworks display." "Might as well send out an invitation," Sala replied, but she couldn't help but smile. The chaos of it all was just their style. Grok shifted his weight, his clunky boots echoing in the narrow corridor. "How about the drones? We've messed with them before. Maybe we could use them to send a message." Gliza nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Yeah. The drones have their own comm systems. We just need to rig one to transmit our message. Sala considered it, her mind racing. It was risky, but it was their best shot. If they could pull it off, they might just turn the tide. All right, let's get to work. Back in his cell, Eamon was fiddling with the loose panel on his cot. Apparently, even interstellar prisons had budget cuts. With a bit of effort, he had a makeshift tool in his hands, an old piece of metal, bent and sharp. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He knew the cargo drones, those flying toasters, were programmed with more intelligence than they let on, largely because nobody expected much from a glorified delivery bot. But their systems were rudimentary enough that, with a little coaxing, they could be convinced to do something new. Eamon had to time it perfectly. He needed to get into the service tunnels, where the drones were held when not in use. It meant taking a risk, possibly getting caught, but he didn't have any other options. And if there was one thing Eamon Ray excelled at, it was turning a bad situation into a slightly less bad one. He waited for the guard's shift change, the one time when the guard was as distracted as a cat with a laser pointer. When the moment came, Eamon acted. He faked a fall, letting out a groan that was Oscar-worthy in its performance. The guard finally stirred from his stupor, glanced over. "What's going on?" Eamon writhed on the floor, clutching his side. Just a little something called appendicitis. Heard of it? No. Well, it's a killer." The guard hesitated, clearly unsure. Eamon doubled down, groaning louder. "I'm going to need a doctor or a priest. Whichever's available." Finally, the guard relented, opening the cell and stepping in. Eamon seized the moment, jumping up and shoving the guard with all his might. The guard stumbled back, just enough for Eamon to make his escape, sprinting down the corridor with reckless abandon. As he ran, Eamon couldn't help but laugh. "See ya, stone face. Next time, try reading a medical manual." He darted into the labyrinthine corridors of the station, his mind a whirlwind of adrenaline and strategy. He needed to get to the service tunnels fast. With each turn, he dodged past patrols, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. Finally, he reached the entrance to the tunnels, slipping inside with a breathless gasp. The air was cooler here, the lights flickering ominously, but it was a welcome change from the oppressive atmosphere above. Meanwhile, Sala and the students were deep in their own mission, working their way through the station's network. Grok had managed to access the drone controls, his fingers flying over the datapad with a skill that would have impressed even a professional hacker. "Got it," Grok finally said, a grin spreading across his face. "We can send a message to Earth. We just need someone to record it." Sala handed him a small recorder, her voice steady. "Make it quick. We don't have much time." Gliza stepped forward, her expression determined. "I'll do it. I've been practicing my impassioned speech face." Grok set up the recorder and Gliza took a deep breath before speaking. "This is Gliza, student of Eamon Ray. We're aboard the mining station, Gravel Pit 42. Earth is being framed for inciting unrest, and our teacher has been arrested for telling us the truth. We need help. This message is our only way to reach you." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "Please don't let them silence us." The students worked quickly, uploading the message into the drone system. It was a long shot, but it was better than doing nothing. Back in the service tunnels, Eamon had reached the drone bay. It was a cavernous space, filled with the quiet hum of machinery and the occasional clank of metal. He moved cautiously, his eyes scanning for any sign of surveillance. The drones were lined up in neat rows, their metallic bodies gleaming under the dim lights. Eamon approached one of the drones, his makeshift tool in hand. He pried open a panel, his fingers working with the precision of a surgeon. "Come on, you glorified toaster," he muttered under his breath. "Let's see if you've got any tricks left." He connected the tool to the drone's mainframe, his mind racing as he input commands. It was a delicate operation, but he'd always had a knack for technology. As the drone's systems came to life, Eamon felt a surge of triumph. "All right, my metal friend," he said with a grin. "Time to play messenger." The drone's comm system flickered, a small holographic display lighting up with the message from Grok and the others. Eamon watched as the words scrolled across the screen, a feeling of hope welling up inside him. With a final command, he sent the message soaring through the void, a signal that would reach Earth if luck was on their side. It was a gamble, but Eamon had always been one to bet on long odds. He was about to slip away when his luck ran out. A patrol of drones rounded the corner, their metallic eyes locking onto him with predatory intent. "Well, this is awkward," Eamon said, backing away slowly. "I don't suppose any of you are up for a friendly chat." The drones advanced, their intentions clear. Eamon sighed, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right, take me back. But just so you know, your timing sucks." As they led him away, Eamon couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. He'd sent the message. He'd done what he could. Now it was in the hands of the humans on Earth and the students who had taken up the mantle. Back in the depths of Gravel Pit 42, Sala and the others were regrouping. They'd done their part, and now it was time to prepare for the final stand. "We've sent the message," Sala said, her voice filled with determination. "Now we wait for Earth to respond." Gliza nodded, her expression fierce. "And in the meantime, we keep the pressure on. They may have Eamon, but they don't have us." Grok grinned, his eyes shining with defiance. "Let's give them hell." The students moved through the station like shadows, their resolve unshakable. They had a plan, they had hope, and they weren't going to give up without a fight. As Eamon was escorted back to his cell, he knew one thing for sure: the battle was far from over. He might have been a prisoner, but his spirit was as free as ever, and so were the minds of those he'd taught. The rebellion was just getting started, and as long as there was breath in his lungs, Eamon Ray would keep fighting. For his students, for Earth, and for a future worth believing in. The message, a desperate plea in the void, drifted through the ether of space, clinging to the hope that someone, anyone, on Earth would pick up the call. Eamon's gamble lay in the hands of bureaucrats who likely spent more time sniffing their own importance than sifting through distress signals. If luck was on his side, and let's be honest, it rarely was, someone would notice the transmission amid the cosmic static. Meanwhile, back on Earth, somewhere between the stacks of coffee-stained reports and the endless meetings that accomplished nothing, a junior analyst finally came across the message. At first, he thought it was a prank, students on a mining station, an arrest, a rebellion. It read like bad fiction, the kind that gets rejected even by self-publishing platforms. But curiosity got the better of him. It was either investigate or continue highlighting trade deficits until his eyes bled. Opting for the lesser evil, he forwarded the message to the higher-ups, hoping it wouldn't land him in the same cell Eamon was festering in. Back on Gravel Pit 42, Eamon paced his cell, trying not to dwell on the fact that his fate now depended on people who probably considered tying their shoelaces an intellectual exercise. He had faith in his students, though. If they could weave a rebellion under the noses of their oppressors, then they were capable of just about anything. Grok and his band of misfit revolutionaries were hard at work, their plan a patchwork of desperation and ingenuity. Sala, usually the voice of reason, was in no mood to play it safe. They'd been pushed into the corner long enough. "All right, people," Sala said, gathering the group in their dimly lit hideout. "We're going to take over the command center." Grok raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "Oh, is that all? I thought maybe a light afternoon stroll or a spot of tea." Sala ignored the sarcasm, her mind set on the task ahead. "If we control the station, we can make sure our message gets out there. No more playing defense. It's time we go on the offensive." Gliza, never one to miss a chance to stir the pot, chimed in, "And maybe we can redecorate while we're at it. I'm thinking less gray, more." "Anything else?" Zark, a perpetual skeptic, scratched his head. "And what about Varek and his goon squad? They won't just roll out the red carpet for us." Sala gave him a pointed look. "That's where Grok's magic comes in. We're going to cause a little technical difficulty." Grok grinned, a glint of mischief in his eye. "You know, hacking into the station's mainframe isn't as hard as you'd think. They guard it like it's the Holy Grail, but really, it's more like a poorly locked bicycle." "Perfect," Sala nodded. "Gliza, Zark, you'll create a distraction. Make it loud, make it chaotic. We need all eyes off that control room." Gliza saluted mockingly. "Consider it done." I've been itching to make a scene. As they finalized their plans, Eamon was escorted through the labyrinthine corridors of the station once more, ostensibly for questioning. The guard, a humorless block of muscle, didn't say a word. Eamon figured he'd cracked one too many jokes about the guard's lineage the last time. They arrived at a small interrogation room, dimly lit like the rest of the station. Gorak, the green-skinned overseer with all the charm of a damp rag, waited inside. His expression was unreadable, but Eamon couldn't resist a jab. "Gorak, my favorite interrogation buddy. What's the special today? Waterboarding or just another round of bad cop, worse cop?" Gorak's eyes narrowed. "You're in no position to be flippant, Mr. Ray. Your little friends are causing quite a stir," Eamon shrugged, leaning back in his chair with exaggerated nonchalance. "Kids these days, huh? You try to teach them critical thinking and they start thinking critically. Who would have thought?" Gorak leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "You're playing a dangerous game. The consortium doesn't take kindly to insurrection." Eamon's grin didn't waver. "Oh, I'm not playing a game. I'm just trying to survive Thursday." Back in the service tunnels, Grok was hard at work. His fingers danced over the datapad, bypassing security protocols with the ease of someone who'd been hacking since before he could walk. The station's defenses were a patchwork of outdated tech and lazy updates, and Grok was the tailor ready to rip apart the seams. With a final keystroke, he was in. The station's security systems flickered, momentarily blinded by his digital sleight of hand. Grok felt a rush of triumph. "All right, we've got a window. Let's move." Gliza and Zark were already in position, ready to unleash chaos. Their chosen method of distraction. A malfunctioning drone set to zip around the station's central hub, blaring an old Earth classic, Yakety Sax. Because really, who could concentrate with that playing? As the music blared, echoing through the corridors, the station erupted into confusion. Security personnel scrambled, trying to locate the source of the disruption. It was the perfect cover. Sala led the charge, her heart pounding as they made their way towards the command center. The halls were eerily empty, the usual patrols drawn away by the cacophony. They moved swiftly, determined not to waste the opportunity. They reached the command center, its entrance guarded by a pair of drones. Sala gestured to Grok, who quickly disabled them with a few keystrokes. The doors slid open and they rushed inside. The command center was a hive of activity, operators shouting over each other as they tried to regain control of the station. It was chaos, but controlled chaos, the kind Sala and her team thrived in. "All right, let's make this quick," Sala ordered. They spread out, each taking a station. Grok worked his magic on the main console, his fingers flying over the keys with practiced ease. "We're in," Grok announced, his voice barely audible over the din. "I'm sending the message to all channels." "Earth's got to notice this time," Sala nodded, watching as the message was broadcast across the galaxy. It was a bold move, but it was all they had left. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the junior analyst's gamble was paying off. The message from Gravel Pit 42 had reached the right ears, and diplomatic pressure was mounting. The Galactic Court was forced to take notice, the accusations against Earth now scrutinized under a much brighter light. In the mining station, Varric stormed into the command center, his face a mask of rage. "What is the meaning of this? You think you can just waltz in here?" And Sala cut him off, her voice steady and unyielding. "This ends now, Varric. We've sent the message. Earth knows what's happening and they won't stand by." Varric's eyes blazed with fury, but there was a hint of desperation there too. He'd lost control and he knew it. "You're making a mistake. The consortium won't tolerate this rebellion." Sala stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "Maybe not, but we're done being pawns in their game. We're taking our future into our own hands." As Earth's response began to filter through the station's comm systems, Eamon knew their gamble had paid off. The message had been received and the wheels of change were in motion. In his cell, he felt a sense of pride welling up. His students had done it. They'd taken the impossible and made it reality. Now, all they had to do was hold the line. The station was theirs for now. And for the first time, Eamon felt a flicker of hope. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters, rebels with a cause, and that was something worth believing in. The rebellion was far from over, but the tide had turned. Eamon, Sala, Grok, and all the others were ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that they'd already achieved the impossible. They'd won a battle, but the war was just beginning. And as long as there was breath in their lungs and defiance in their hearts, they'd keep fighting. For themselves, for Earth, and for a future where they could truly be free. After all, life was the exam, and they were determined to pass with flying colors, mostly red, the color of rebellion and defiance. But hey, any color was better than gray. The trial of the century, or at least the solar system, was nearing its conclusion, and Gravel Pit 42 had never been so lively. As lively as a mining station run by aliens with all the charm of industrial machinery could be. The consortium's representatives were sweating like a group of tourists who just realized their resort was next to an active volcano. Meanwhile, Earth's diplomats were in fine form, slinging accusations with the precision of a dart champion on a caffeine rush. Eamon was there, observing the spectacle with the detached amusement of a man who's been in the belly of the beast and come out the other end, albeit with a few more scars and a deep-seated loathing for alien bureaucracy. He was flanked by Grok and Sala, their presence a testament to the success of their rebellion, a rebellion that had started with a determined group of misfit students, and a teacher so fed up he might as well have been the patron saint of lost causes. And here I thought the pinnacle of my career was getting you lot to read, Eamon muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Guess it's a good thing you set your sights a bit higher, huh? Grok replied, his alien features twisted into something resembling a grin, or lower, depending on how you look at it. Sala was less amused. Focus, you two. We're not out of the wormhole yet. The trial had been an exercise in ridiculousness, a parade of self-important alien suits trying to outdo each other in the art of doublespeak. The consortium's spokesperson, a particularly oily individual by the name of Zarks, was desperately trying to salvage something from the wreckage of their reputation. This is an affront, Zarks declared, his voice booming through the chamber like an overzealous auctioneer. The consortium has operated within the bounds of galactic law. Eamon stifled a laugh. Yeah, like a drunkard operates within the bounds of sobriety, Grok chuckled. They're running out of straws to clutch and fast. On the other side, Earth's representative, a woman with a gaze that could melt tungsten, leaned forward. The evidence is clear. Your practices not only endangered human lives but also violated multiple interstellar treaties. It's a wonder you're still in business, Zarks blustered, his defense reduced to the verbal equivalent of flailing. You humans have always exaggerated. This is nothing more than a smear campaign, says the guy whose business model is as transparent as a black hole, Eamon quipped, earning a glare from Zarks. Sala nudged him. Rein it in, Ray. We're not here to antagonize, why not? It's the one thing I'm good at, Eamon replied with a shrug. The court murmured, the weight of evidence looming like a particularly pungent smell that couldn't be ignored. The rebellion's efforts had unearthed a treasure trove of incriminating data, and Grok's hacking skills had turned the tide in their favor. It was a classic David and Goliath scenario, only this time David had brought a bazooka. All parties prepare for judgment, the presiding judge, an alien with the appearance of a sentient fern, intoned with all the enthusiasm of someone announcing the end of a very dull board meeting. As the verdict was delivered, a collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Earth was exonerated, the consortium was slapped with sanctions that would make their accountants weep, and reforms were mandated with immediate effect. It was a victory of monumental proportions, a blow to corporate tyranny that would echo across the galaxy, or at least until the next big scandal. Eamon leaned back, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Well, that's one for the history books, if anyone bothers to read them. "It's a start," Sala replied, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the reactions of everyone present. "But we've still got work to do." Back at Gravel Pit 42, the atmosphere was electric. The station, once a drab symbol of oppression, was now alive with the chatter of newfound hope. The corridors that had echoed with the monotonous hum of machinery now pulsed with laughter and energy. The command center, which had been the heart of their rebellion, was buzzing. Grok was at his station, his fingers dancing over the controls with the ease of a maestro conducting his orchestra. "Never thought I'd see the day this place wasn't run by the green-skinned mafia," Grok said, his tone a mix of disbelief and satisfaction. Eamon clapped him on the back. "Don't get used to it. We've only just started cleaning up their mess." Sala was already drafting plans for the station's future, her mind an engine of efficiency and foresight. "We need to establish a council, ensure everyone has a say. Democracy on a mining station. Who'd have thought?" Eamon mused, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's either that or let Varak and his cronies slip back in," Sala replied, shooting him a glance that could slice through titanium. "Point taken," Eamon conceded. As plans for the station's future began to take shape, Eamon found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. From the chaos of rebellion to the cusp of a new era, it was a journey that had tested them all. It was chaotic, messy, and downright terrifying at times, but it was theirs. A victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, and that was something to be proud of. In the days that followed, Eamon's students were hailed as heroes, their once-dismissed efforts now celebrated. They were a motley crew of idealists, pranksters, and dreamers, bound together by a shared desire for something better. And despite everything, Eamon couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. "What's next, Mr. Ray?" Gliza asked, her eyes alight with curiosity and mischief. "Next." Eamon paused, considering his response. "We keep fighting, not with weapons but with ideas. We've shown them what a group of determined individuals can do. Now we build something worth all the trouble we've caused." Zark, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "And what if they come back swinging?" Eamon smirked. "Then we swing harder. Life's an exam, remember. We just need to make sure we pass." With Earth's response to their message and the station's new status as a beacon of rebellion, well, more like a slightly flickering candle, they had a chance to rewrite their futures. A chance to prove that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, hope could thrive. Eamon stood with Grok and Sala, surveying the station that had become their battleground, their home, and now their symbol of unity. "It's not perfect," Sala said, her gaze steady and determined. "No, it's not. But it's a start," Grok replied, his voice filled with a rare optimism. Eamon nodded, a sense of resolve settling over him. "We've done the impossible, and now we've got the rest of the galaxy